Hey everyone, it's Drayton from Scale Trains, and I'm excited to talk to you today about the latest run of Rivet Counter HO Scale EMD SD40-2s. In this Spotlight Series video, we're going to be going over each of the road names and paint schemes in this run, so stay tuned. So the latest run of Rivet Counter HO Scale EMD SD40-2s has a wide variety of road names and paint schemes, and even the road names that we're offering have multiple paint scheme variations. Just on the table here, you can see that there's 3 different paint schemes just for Burlington Northern on the table, and we also have another version that's available that we're not showing on the table just simply because we couldn't fit all of the versions on the table. But these are all the road names we're offering in this run. And this run features some new tooling and some long-awaited versions like the Union Pacific SD40Ns. That's a modern version of the SD40-2, a rebuilt version. We actually have an employee here, Marlon, who has been waiting for over 10 years for these models, and he couldn't be more happy to have them. So in this video, we're going to walk through each paint scheme that you see here on the table, give you some brief information about why you should add one to your railroad, what makes them unique, and all that. So let's just dive into it. We're going to go from left to right. First things first, let's talk about Burlington Northern. So Burlington Northern, they owned more SD40-2s than any other railroad. And they needed a lot of horsepower because they inherited a lot of really old locomotives from their predecessor railroads. In 1970, BN was really the first super railroad. And they had track as far south as Pensacola, Florida, going all the way north to Seattle. So BN needed some horsepower, and they turned to EMD as a reliable locomotive builder, and the SD40-2 is the answer. This run of SD40-2s is really for you late 80s and early 90s modelers. And of course, you can see the iconic white face paint scheme. I believe this is the first time we've done the white face scheme for the SD40-2s. But what makes this run truly unique from the rest is the ditch lights. Now, when I say ditch lights, they're not your traditional ditch lights. You know, a younger person like myself, when we think of ditch lights, we think of the lights that we see on the rails today. But in the early 90s, Burlington Northern decided to experiment with an early version of ditch lights, and they were actually strobe lights. Now, I can't tell you the brand name of the strobes right off the top of my head, but they were labeled as ditch lights. We'll put the name on the screen for you. But really they were strobes, and they were only activated when the locomotive crossed over a grade crossing with the horn blowing. And it was BN's early experiment of trying to raise awareness to motorists before you had ditch lights. There was a lot of experimentation. Burlington Northern had a lot of older locomotives that had gyra and Mars lights, and as those locomotives were retired or removed from the roster, they switched to having strobe lights, the orange strobe lights on the top of the cab. But in the 90s, they were trying to figure out a way to really raise awareness, and so they went to the white face paint scheme, which they thought was more visible to motorists, but they still found that they were having too many grade crossing incidents for comfort. So they tried these strobe lights out, and they weren't really successful. The FRA had a study that came out in the 90s that basically said Christmas tree style lights, so a headlight and then 2 ditch lights. The Canadian style ditch lights kind of looks like a triangle or a Christmas tree, and that really became the standard. In 1997, that's when that standard passed. But in the early 90s, BN was really the first American railroad to experiment with additional lights on the pilot itself, or actually on the walkway, I should say, with Burlington Northern. GE, they started adding ditch lights to their Dash 8 locomotives in the early 90s, and then so on. But BN was an early adopter of those. And interestingly enough, not a lot of people know this, but Burlington Northern was the only Western railroad, Class 1, that had flashing ditch lights. So the lighting effect on these, just a really neat thing to see. As somebody who is so used to your standard flashing ditch lights, seeing these strobe lights and these random patterns as you come up to a grade crossing is really neat. So seeing this model in person is really cool. I believe this is the first time it's ever been done in HO scale by a manufacturer, so really cool to see these locomotives coming into the fray. Of course, they pair really well with our GP39s that are also in stock now. Same paint scheme, the white face paint scheme, and they look great together. Moving along, we have one of the Burlington Northern SD40-2 Bs. Now this one's kind of neat too because it has that later, white face or white stripe paint scheme. So that's just a more modern version of the road numbers that we previously offered. These units very rarely left the yard. If I'm not mistaken, this particular road number spent a tremendous amount of time in Galesburg, Illinois. That was a very big hub for Burlington Northern, and I think that they are still in active service on BNSF in that very yard. So neat to see the updated paint scheme there. If you want a more in-depth review of these locomotives, you want to check out Burlington Northern Modeler's review. He's one of our YouTube partners who did a full review of these units, and it doesn't get more nerdy than that because he'll give you all the details, all the road-specific details on those. Now, this is for you guys who model the 70s. This is BN 1876. It's one of the Burlington Northern's 3, I believe, EMD SD40-2s that wore this paint scheme. They had a General Electric unit too. There was kind of an issue when this unit got delivered. It was actually damaged in a grade crossing collision, and so BN needed a replacement, and so they found another SD40-2 that they quickly dressed up into the bicentennial scheme while this one was out of service, and that one actually helped pull the American Freedom Train. I'm pretty sure this one did at one point too, but they sent this unit back to the shop, got it repainted and dressed up and fixed, and back out on the road. And since they had 2 units with the 1776 on it, they decided to number this one 1876. And of course, being that 1970s era, you've got the strobe light on the top of the locomotive. This one's kind of cool too because it has some unique lift rings on the top here by the radiator fans, which is cool. None of the other road names in this run have those lift rings, which is pretty neat. I don't think I've ever seen us use that version before in HO scale. On the engineer side, you have Colonel Custer, and then on the other side, the conductor side, you have Sitting Bull, which is really neat. Just a neat looking paint scheme for you bicentennial collectors. I don't see us rerunning this scheme for a very long time, so if you're a bicentennial collector, I highly recommend picking one up by clicking the link in the video description. So neat to see this one here, especially with the 250th anniversary coming up. It's crazy to think about, but we're almost there to the 250. So moving along, our next paint scheme is the Missouri, Kansas, Texas. This is road number 621. Pretty sure this is one of the ones with the unique nose striping. Actually, there's only one road number with unique nose striping. The MKT used these locomotives in pool service between the Union Pacific and Burlington Northern, and they were primarily a 4-axle railroad, and so having these big 6 axles was a big change for MKT, but they proved to be very reliable locomotives. One thing that's cool is that it has a Leslie horn, and all of the horn chimes are facing the same direction, but another unique feature is that it had a single chime horn on the end of the long hood, which is the only road name in this run that has that horn. There's only a few railroads that I can think of off the top of my head, Southern Railway being one that had horns on each end of the locomotive. That's a really neat detail. Also, you'll note that some of these road names have a V-shaped grab iron on top by the radiator fans. Others have a curved radiator grab iron on the top. And then others don't have any. Others just have a standard grab iron. And MKT is one of those railroads that has just a standard grab iron. So that's one of the things that really jump out at me. Great looking paint scheme. It's a must-have model for you MKT guys. Also, this unit has a strobe light as well, which is a pretty neat feature. So again, before you had ditch lights, the railroads were looking for different ways to bring awareness to motorists at grade crossing, and that was just one of the early ways that they did it. So we've got a lot of requests from modelers, including our friend Devin Jackson, for more MKT models. So hopefully this is the first of many, and we're really glad to have MKT in the fold. All right, for you Santa Fe modelers, it's the long-awaited late 80s, early 90s version of the SD40-2. And we have a couple of different versions. We have the MKM, which is the Morrison-Knudsen maintenance agreement locomotives. These SD40-2s were rebuilt in the 80s, and they were noted for having the nose headlight, and that's one of the things that you can really differentiate the two. They also received rooftop air conditioning unit and your elevated Sinclair antennas on a stand, which is pretty cool. And these locomotives had Locotrol, and you can tell the conduit is all up there on the top of the cab, which is really neat. And then you actually have a line for the air heading to the horn that goes along the cab roof, which is a really, really, really cool detail. As I mentioned earlier, this particular road name has a V-shaped radiator grab iron, which is pretty cool at the top. It's yellow, it really stands out. There's no number boards on the end of the long hood. It's very simple, and that's, you know, your classic Santa Fe. Santa Fe added ditch lights in the early 90s. So like I mentioned earlier, we have road numbers without ditch lights for you pre-ditch light era guys, and then the ditch light version. These ditch light units lasted through the 90s. They eventually got patched for BNSF, but primarily this is for you Santa Fe modelers. They look great alongside our Dash 9s. They're really a must-have if you're a 90s Santa Fe modeler. And you know, the Rivet Counter brand is just incredible. All of the different details. I think the roof, if I had to pick a specific road name in this run with my favorite rooftop detail, it would definitely be Santa Fe. So really cool looking paint scheme, and I'm so glad that we're offering these versions. Like I said earlier, we get a lot of requests for more and more modernized Santa Fe. Another thing to mention too, the latest run of GP30s are in, Santa Fe GP30Us. And you guys who model the Santa Fe in the early 90s and late 80s, they are non-ditch light versions. So you can kind of pair them up with your SD40-2s without ditch lights, and even some of them ran into the 90s. The ditch light era was interesting because sometimes you had locomotives that before the FRA mandate came out that had them and didn't have them. And after that mandate came out, locomotives without ditch lights were limited to 20 mile an hour. But until 1997, you really saw kind of a hodgepodge of locomotives with and without ditch lights. Moving along, our next road name is Norfolk Southern. Actually, these are former Conrail SD40-2s, but they are numbered and patched, the Conrail version at least, for Norfolk Southern. So in 1999, CSX and Norfolk Southern split Conrail. Conrail had a lot of SD40-2s because, like Burlington Northern, they were kind of the super railroad of the East. The federal government brought Conrail together out of various different bankrupt roads, Penn Central being one of them. And they needed a lot of SD40-2s for motive power. They needed reliable power. So the SD40-2, one of the greatest locomotives ever built, was their answer. And when CSX and NS split the two railroads, the power was divided up. CSX got SD40-2s and NS got some, although NS did get the lion's share of the roster. And these units are former Conrail, and as you can tell, they've been repainted. All the details, generally speaking, between the two paint schemes are the same. The horns are a little bit different. The radio antenna setup's a little bit different. Like, for instance, this one has a Sinclair antenna. This one has a Firecracker antenna. The Conrail quality units, they have the patch on the cab side. One thing that's kind of important to note, a lot of younger rail fans don't know this, but when they were dividing up the assets of Conrail, Norfolk Southern would subletter their locomotives as PRR for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and CSX would subletter their equipment NYC for New York Central, as those were the two primary railroads that made up Conrail. And for accounting purposes in those early days, it made it a lot easier to keep track of who owned what. Eventually, these locomotives in the Conrail blue got repainted into the Norfolk Southern Thoroughbred scheme. Now, one way to tell the age of these particular locomotives is the Norfolk Southern units do not have the horse on the side of the engine. And that's because the horse head paint scheme was not adapted until 2002, which was Norfolk Southern's 20th anniversary at the time. And these units, some of them did end up getting repainted into the horsehead scheme in the late 2000s, early 2010s. But in the early 2000s, if the locomotive was repainted before 2002, it wore the straight white lines on the NS logo. Now that's not to say they didn't run around like this for a long time. As you can see along the side of the locomotive, they actually have the dashed white sill stripes. The FRA required the sill striping, whether it was dashed or a solid line, after 2007. So the way that this locomotive is decorated is for post-2007 operations. So even though it has the earlier scheme, you can mix and match anything after 2007 with these. And if you're a guy who models before 2007, it's really not that hard to cover up those sill stripes, especially since they're dashed. It'd be a fun weekend weathering project for you. And then moving along to CSX, I kind of position these models together since Norfolk Southern and CSX split Conrail. The 8200 series SD40-2s are former L&N locomotives, and they have the nose-mounted headlight, which is something that a lot of modelers have been asking for a long time. Another thing that's cool about these CSX units is that they have what I'm calling butterfly-style ditch lights. To be honest, I'm sure there's a technical term out there, but I've just always called them butterfly ditch lights because they kind of look like butterfly wings. And they're really neat. CSX was the only Class 1 railroad that had this style of ditch lights. There was a lot of experimentation going on with ditch lights when these units were running around. A lot of these SD40-2s, they operated in this configuration, in this paint scheme through the mid-2000s. Some of them, I believe one of the road numbers lasted as late as 2010. I really highly encourage everyone who's watching this video to do your research. Click the link in the video description, and you can look at each road number. It'll tell you what the heritage of it was, how long it lasted, what its appearance was like. The website has a lot of great details. I know enough about these road names to be dangerous, but I'm not an expert on any particular railroad except for Norfolk Southern. So check me, fact check me, go check out the details on the website. But I'll tell you, one of the things I really like about this run of locomotives is the sound is just incredible. And the CSX locomotive in particular has a K5LA horn, and it just sounds absolutely fantastic. The bell configuration is a little bit different, but when you hear it operating on the layout, the horn just sounds so good. It's what I'm used to hearing in my backyard. A CSX line runs through my backyard, so it's nice to hear that kind of horn running by my house. All right, last but not least is our most modern road name in this run, and that's Union Pacific, the highly anticipated SD40Ns. Now, if you're a Union Pacific modern modeler, you have got to have these. These units were rebuilt in the early 2010s, and most of the updating was done internally, but externally, these units had PTC added to the cab. Various different kinds of updates were done to the car body that aren't super obvious to me as someone who is not a Union Pacific modeler. But one thing that really stands out, of course, is the nose differences. And we'll show you here on screen. We have a snoot nose version and a standard nose version. And you can look the lengths up on our website of how long the noses themselves are. On the rear of the UP units, there are no number boards. And of course, class lights are blanked out. I think all of the class lights in this run are blanked out except MKT and Burlington Northern. Like I said earlier, this is more of the late 80s, 90s, and early 2000s run. But the Union Pacific units are in high demand because this is the motive power they use today on locals. And they just look and they sound so good. So I believe we're offering 2 road numbers with snoot noses and 2 road numbers with the standard type nose. It's interesting too because the way that the detail is on the roofs are slightly different, spread out among the road numbers. So there is some variety on the Union Pacific beyond just the noses. So, and I like the 1656 here because it has the old school wheel type handbrake on the locomotive. So, and another thing I'll add too is Union Pacific is the only road name in this run with rear ditch lights. When Union Pacific rebuilt them, they added rear ditch lights because, like I said, these units are used on locals a lot. Even though they're a Western railroad, they decided to put ditch lights on both ends. So all in all, so much variety to choose from in this run of SD40-2s. It's really important, though, that you place your orders today because inventory is limited for most road names, especially Union Pacific. At the time of recording this video, all of Union Pacific's are sold out. That's because pre-order reservations have not yet expired. By the time you watch this video, there should be some available as pre-orders expire this Friday, but we fully expect inventory to be limited. So great variety of road names and paint schemes in this run. The sound is absolutely incredible. And just speaking personally here, I think this is some of the best sounding locomotives that we've ever offered. I think you're really going to be impressed with them. So with that said, make sure you click the link in the video description, place your order today. Thanks so much for watching this Rivet Counter Spotlight videos. And make sure you hit the subscribe button and ring the bell to get notified every time we upload videos just like this. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. We'll see you in the next video.